Prime Minister cares or PM cares. It's, of course, not a South India only topic, but it's for all the nation that this matters. And joining us to talk about this is Poonam Agarwal. She's a senior journalist, independent journalist, very familiar for most of you, I'm sure, because she's done a lot of work, a lot of very commendable work on electoral bonds. In fact, Poonam's work has really exposed how opaque the government of India is. Welcome, Poonam, to the show.
Thank you, Dhanya.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and Nandini, who's joining us in the show today, Nandini did an investigation last year with two colleagues from News Laundry and Cora Abraham from the News Minute, where we looked at how every time there's a tax raid, the donations for the BJP were going up. And in fact, I thought that work was quite path breaking because when the electoral bond data came, the first thing that people were looking at is how many companies which were raided were giving money to the party in power, right? That's not just the BJP, but any other state party also in power. Poonam, I want to come to you first. The financial statements have been put out by PM Cares, but it's bare minimum. That's a story that you did for the News Minute also. Tell us about all the financial statements till now. What does it have and what does it not have?
So, Dhanya, let's keep it simple for the readers. The details of the audit report, which is being uploaded on the PM Cares Fund website, anybody can access that report. The problem with this audit report that has been uploaded is the fact that it's a two-page audit report. Per financial year has a two-page audit report. And till now, what we have is the audit report of 2022 and 23. That is the last. We still don't have 23 and 24 financial year audit report. Point one. Secondly, the pages of each financial report only gives us the 2-3 facts like opening balance, the receipt, the donation received by PM Cares, expenditures made by PM Cares with different subheads, and the closing balance of each year. The problem with it is that if you closely look at the audit report, at the end, the auditor has mentioned that with all these financial year audit report, attached are the financial statement, which runs into 1 to 11 page for some year, for 1 to 10 pages, maybe 10 to 15 pages is the average which we have seen. Now, the point is why these financial statements have not been uploaded. That is the problem that we have tried to highlight through this article, which is published in the News Minute. Now, these financial statements, why are these important? Because they contain the bare bones, as in the details of the observation of the auditor, where did the finance come from, who donated, the donor's name probably, the details of the donation, and where the expenses were made. Because if you see in the audit report, there are some headers which mention about that certain amount was spent on oxygen cylinders, on ventilators during COVID period. Now, we know that, okay, fine, this number of money was spent, but where, which hospital, who got the payments? These are the details which we need to know. These are the details which are mentioned in the financial statement. I spoke to a few chartered accountants. They said that these financial statements make you realize whether the audit has been done properly, all the documents, whether they were shared by the individual or the company with the chartered accountant, whether there are any errors in the balance sheet or not. So that is the reason why the financial statement is important. Now, we have not seen these financial statements because it has not been made public. That is where the problem of transparency comes in. Why do we need to know these details? Because donations were made by us as well. We as a citizen, many people donated during COVID. PM Cares, the main agenda behind establishing PM Cares was to deal with pandemic. Now, when this was established, the government, the Prime Minister, everybody reached out to the people and institutions and private companies, even the government employees. They were made to donate part of their salaries. So when donation has come from different places, why people do not have the right to know? Secondly, it is if you file an RTI, you cannot get any response because they say it's a trust. Now, why is it a trust when it is run by Prime Minister's office? The trustee is the Prime Minister himself. Then the reason because the website says that it is registered under the Trust Act. Fine, but why you are not taking it under the RTI Act? So these are the questions which have been repeatedly raised ever since it has been established. Multiple articles have been done, but today what we are seeing is that even the audit report is not complete. So the access to complete information as far as the financial transactions are concerned is still not in the public domain.
So I think the answers to most of this from the government or the supporters would be trust in Modi ji. Why do you guys want to know what is the audit report? It must have been used for something good, right? Something good for the nation. But that apart, Nandini, this whole PM case fund has been problematic right from the beginning. No RTI access, and multiple times the government has changed what is the fund about. They've even said that it's not a government run fund, right? So it has been problematic from the word go.
Correct. So it's also similar to, as Poonam also pointed out in her story, it's very similar to PM National Relief Fund. Now, that was set up in 1948 to serve people who were suffering from partition. And then it moved on to other purposes, which is similar as now the PM Cares. So you have two parallel funds. Both are opaque now. We don't know who's putting in the money. We don't know where it is going, right? In the time where we have fought with this government to know about source of funding for electoral bonds. We had to find out where the trusts were. You have electoral trusts which were giving tremendous amounts of money, and then you have donations. And this is not small change, these are huge amounts of money. So obviously there is an attempt every year constantly, right from 2020 when it was formed, this PM Cares, there has been an attempt because they collected more than 3,000 crores in the first month alone. Where is this money going? Who is paying? So because of they talk about transparency. And these are the questions people are constantly asking. They're going to court. They're, trying various channels to get this government to give us some information. And the only information available now in the public domain is what is collated through, say, press releases from the Information Bureau, or maybe a question asked in the parliament and there is an answer given. We are scrambling for sources because there is nothing said. But there is transparency. We need to know where the money is going because ultimately we don't know what is it being used for. There is a chunk they say they have received. There is a chunk they say is going out. Beyond that, what? So if you're calling yourself a public charitable trust, and as she pointed out, that, they have a .gov.in, it is run out of the PMO. In fact, it's the bureaucrats who run. Now, there are trustees like a Sudha Murthy, who became a Rajya Sabha MP last year. There is somebody from Piramal, who is Mukesh Ambani's son-in-law. Piramal. Now, he paid just before 2019. In 2019, he had paid 20 crores to the BJP. He is on this advisory. There is certainly bound to be a conflict of interest. Is that what they're trying to hide? We know this present dispensation doesn't like questions, but every act of theirs does give rise to a lot of questions. So yes, people want to know, but so far they have just blocked every step of the way.
So present dispensation does not like questions, does not like transparency, and does not like data. There's a let me explain show that Pooja did last week on what all are the data the government doesn't want us to get. But Poonam, see, there are two problems here, right? One is when the audit reports are so bare minimum, we don't know two things. One is who is giving the money. Now, when we talk about crores and crores of money being given, okay, fine, it is for it's for COVID or whatever it is, but there can be a quid pro quo aspect to this, wherein I'm giving 100 crores to the PM Care Fund because I know that the Prime Minister will be happy with me, right? And then what do I get in return? Like till today, we don't actually know where Adani puts in a lot of his money. We don't know whether it's in electoral bonds or trust because we have not seen any evidence of Adani putting money there. The second part is, the first part is who's putting money. The second question about PM Cares is that where is this money going? We only know very bare minimum, okay, this much for beds, this much for ventilators, etc. But who are the companies getting this tender? How are these companies chosen? What was the kind of money given to each? Did they actually, complete the tender? Were those ventilators given? None of this data is in front of the public, which have given the money.
Yeah, Dhanya. And secondly, the third problem is also that now that officially pandemic is over, COVID as we know, and what will happen to this money? Over 6,000 crore rupees is lying in PM cares. But as per the closing statement of the last audit report 22-23, what will happen to that money? That's the third question, because the whole idea behind setting it up was to deal with the pandemic. As you rightly said, we do not know the minute details. Who are the donors? When did they donate? Because if you remember, when electoral bond data was out, TNM did a lot of story with News Laundry and other media organization. What we pulled out, the first thing which we tried to pull out, the date of transaction. When was it donated? To the political party. Which political party? Was there any clash between the contract that they got from the government? Was there any quid pro quo? So the exchange of hand or the donation which was done through electoral bonds, the timing was very crucial. Now in this audit report, what we do not know, when did they receive the money and from whom? And at the same time, we cannot really assess who actually got the contract, who were the players involved in getting the contract, who were the makers of the ventilators or the oxygen cylinders, whether those orders were placed at the right time. Because if you remember, during the pandemic, the second wave especially, questions were raised on the timing, the date of release of the fund for the ventilators, for the oxygen cylinders, for the vaccines. There was a lot of hue and cry. People forget. People have short-term memory. They forget these things. But second wave was like a monster. People were running around for hospitals, for medical care. That was a crucial time. We want to know whether the government was on their feet before the second wave hit, or they started acting while the second wave was going on. These are some facts which we can get only if we have the date, the release date, when were the payments made. Only then we can find out whether there was any sort of delay by the government agencies in releasing funds or placing orders or procuring machines. What was the reason? So without that financial statement, we are not in a position to find out these details. And I do not know, is this the reason they are not releasing it? What is the reason they are not releasing it? I seriously do not know.
So the audit reports, Poonam, if I'm not mistaken, have been released recently for 2020-23, right?
Yes, it was released in December, mid-December.
I mean, just a joke, but we had an income tax search quite a few years ago. To all the people who are listening to the News Minute for the first time, we were the income tax sleuths had come here, and we had the case going on for 3 years, and it, in fact, went on for 3.5 years because the pandemic was going on and some of the cases were getting prolonged. But of course, there was nothing against us, so they had to shut down the case. But it was a sort of harassment. We get GST notices from the state for 100 rupees. 100 rupees. And here you're talking about PM Cares not giving their financial statements for 2023-24, 2023-24, even now. Right? I mean, we have literally no idea where this money goes. But Leena, since we always have to talk about the courts, this is a fund which the court also has given a lot of leeway for. The court never opened it up for RTI. So is there any hope of justice from the court?
Well, what happened with the electoral bond story? Like when we thought that once it declares it as an unconstitutional affair, there would be plethora of cases opening up where we would find like what has happened, the quid pro quo, the extortion techniques happened, and why, and the monetary transactions would be looked into by courts. But none of that followed up, right? So we talked about how this government is against data and against multiple other things. But one another thing that they do not like is continuing the Nehruvian legacy, right? So, but they do that same thing in a different name. So the PM Relief Fund was there. They didn't like the idea of going ahead with something that Nehru had established, and then they brought up with the PM Care funds. But what we now want to know is that though this came during the COVID era and there was a centralization of buying ventilators and dispersing it, why didn't the certain accountability things, everything runs on Modi ji ke bharose, right? The money that you collect,
That's the word, Modi ji ke bharose.
Right. So there is a health ministry under the government. Why wasn't a special task force created to get these ventilators to procure, and why wasn't it not announced how this was procured and how this was distributed. But it's completely that information is not there. Anything that will kind of build a public, trust in the way the government functions is not done, because everything runs on Modi ji ke bharose. And so that's the same way that how these funds are being spent, or whether they should be available for auditing, isn't a big. The opposition tried to raise this issue in the parliament, but nothing came out of it, because sort of that didn't in the long run, Modi ji felt that wouldn't affect his public image at all. So what we want to know is that COVID is done and over, and this many funds have been has been collected. How do we not know that the same things that were happening with the electoral bond story, where there was quid pro quo happening, there was extortion techniques being employed? How is it not being employed? Because here is the prime minister sitting there, and along with the home minister, finance minister, and defense minister, right? They are the four people who are managing this. How the PM cares operate? They are not using it to whatever political needs that they have in front of them. So this big question lies open in front of the public, and we don't have answers to that.
But Nandini, we have other institutions like the CAG, for instance, right, which can ask for an audit of this. I mean, from whatever I know, there are all the CM relief funds are audited, like Kerala, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. I've seen a lot of states which put out very detailed audit reports, and also, I mean, they're also criticized for using their funds in a not so good manner. In fact, Kerala is currently facing a controversy, but the point is they are putting it out there. Now, this Modi ji ke bharose, how long can this go on, and why are other institutions not intervening in this?
I'll just get back to the court. I at one point I read in one case where they were again asking for transparency in PM cares. The court said that fund collected for PM cares are entirely different funds, and there's no occasion for you to for them to release it. So the courts also have kind of stayed away. There have been futile efforts. The thing is, we have, in the absence of data, especially under this union government, there is so much absence of data. We are almost holding on so tightly to CAG reports, because they are the only ones telling us something about a lot of things happening. Poonam, I wanted to ask, because PM Cares and the National Relief Fund have independent auditors, the same company, right? SARC and Associates. I don't even know how common that is. How often does a government hire independent auditors for it? Why is it not done by the CAG? Because CAG does have the powers to seek an audit.
Why has PM Cares been kept out of CAG ambit, Poonam?
Well, that's something the government needs to answer, but this is something needs to be looked into. You rightly pointed out, because they can come under the CAG. I spoke to a former CAG officer, and he said, and I have written in the article, that PM Cares Fund can be audited under Section 21 and 22 of DPC Act. And under this section, the CAG could demand the auditors to look into the finances of PM Cares. So definitely CAG can audit the PM Cares Fund. There's no reason it should be handed over to a private company. But then why it is being done? Of course, the questions are, it is from day one, the questions were raised on the audit, and why it is not being handed over. Considering that they do not want to reply under RTI, giving it over to CAG would be like inviting trouble, because CAG, once they get into it, they have to make the entire report public. So, of course, that is one reason which it seems that they did not hand it over to CAG, but CAG could have intervened into it. It's a constitutional body. Let's not forget that. So CAG as a constitutional body, they could have very well demanded a audit of this particular PM Cares Fund. But then again, the legal aspect, which I'm not sure, they could have always said that it's a trust. But then again, the question comes, why government agencies like PMO, the Prime Minister is part of it? And not just that, Dhanya, even, government websites were used to approach different embassies, different high commissions for, advertising PM Cares Fund. The government bodies and institutions were used to advertise these on different platforms. That means taxpayers' money was used into it. So in spite of all these things, why it is not under RTI, why it is not being audited by CAG is a big question which needs to be answered.
There is a response to the RTI. They just say, we are not a public authority. You don't need to know.
I think RTI
And
is like half
Yeah.
dead now. RTI is
Yeah.
half dead.
That era when you could
That's a standard one they reply to all RTIs. That's a standard
I mean,
response.
imagine for this huge amounts coming in, we don't know the criteria for how they decide whom they are going to help and what they are going to help with. We don't know which states it's going to. That's my primary concern. Being in the South, we see this constant tussle between southern states with the union government when it comes to sharing of resources, whether it is relief amounts, whether it is GST share that needs to come back, whether it is projects or infrastructure projects in the South. So where there are non-BJP governments, there is so much friction. So we don't know we don't know how much of this money has gone where. And that matters. You have states in the South where the governors, partial to BJP, are actively working against the local governments. So how does it not matter?
No, so I think putting out the funds are problematic in many ways for Modi ji. One is, where did he get the money from? Second, what did he spend it on? Who were the companies who got tender? And which were the states that he helped to the PM cares, right? Because he's PM of the country.
And now they're going to double down on it, is my belief, because electoral bonds doesn't exist anymore. And donations, of course, is open anyway. But now PM Cares is the only thing where we don't know. People can just divert. What was going into electoral bonds can actually be diverted to this, and we would be none the wiser.
Poonam, is that something, a danger that you see?
PM cares, as if you read their about section, it says that it will deal with any sort of natural calamity or any other pandemic, anything related to health. Now, when you're saying that, ever since 2020, we have seen so many natural calamities, but the fund was never used anywhere. At least the audit report doesn't say that. So what is happening? What is the future of PM Cares is something we also should discuss apart from the finances, because I feel that after so many discussions, still we have not reached anywhere, nor does the court want to say anything on this.
So I have a homework for all our audience. A few days ago, we published Poonam's story on the News Minute saying that why are PM financial statements so bare minimum, right? 2 days after Poonam published the story, now nobody was bothered about the PM Cares audit reports for 1.5 months, right? December it came. Till Poonam wrote her story, nobody in the world was bothered. The second Poonam story is out, at least 2 big national media has put out stories. Today I saw a YouTube video saying PM Cares is using money for children, la 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 music. And there are also stories. The homework is, please go find out which are those media houses now singing praises about the PM Cares Fund only because Poonam put that story out there. I want to end this discussion, Poonam, by asking you something not just about PM Cares, but how frustrating is it for you as a journalist working in Delhi now? Because it's always like you're groping in the darkness, right? First it's electoral bonds, and it's something else. And there seems to be very few people are actually wanting to ask these questions. And that also consistently.
I think that's how I'm made now. That's my nature. I don't know how to put it, but I'm a person who is persistent. I like unearthing things. Maybe that gives me. I feel that gives me a kick. Something which I don't find easily. I like it. And the best thing is that since you mentioned these 2 articles, the best is you should see how nicely I'm trolled on Twitter. People suddenly they get active. They come up with all these things. So that's kind of also engaging, I can't do anything about it, but it's fine. See, I feel that it's our job as a journalist, all of us, to ask questions if we do not get the answers and work on it and put it out. And these things matter to all of us because our fund is there. So it is frustrating, but electoral bonds took 6 years, 5-6 years. We got the judgment. It is crap. I'm happy. All of us are happy. The data is out. So it's always about persistence. If you ask that, what pays back? Not today, maybe later. Someday PM Cares data will also come out. I'm pretty hopeful. If not in this regime, maybe the next regime, whenever it comes. I don't know.
So before I close, there was a story that I was reading the other day that when Russian dictator Stalin was there was some event in which he made a speech and people were clapping. So people wouldn't stop clapping because who will be the first one to stop clapping, right? So they clapped and they clapped and they clapped for 11 minutes. So one industrialist, or I forgot, some trader, was the first person to stop clapping. And everybody in the room apparently just looked at the guy, and slowly others also stopped. But he was persecuted after this. So I sometimes think that when will that internal dissent also come, right? From within the BJP itself, somebody questioning as to we cannot be so opaque that this has to stop at some point of time. It's like that person clapping in Stalin's
But the
room, I
whole
always feel.
thing about the current regime is that the internal process is so opaque. In the earlier governments, journalists who were working from Delhi, we were able to, there would be some source leaking information, there will be some document leaking out. Here, it doesn't leak out because very few people are involved in decision making. Very few people get access to the certain kind of information. And that is what, again, the Modi ji ke barose and Tali Bajana, that, what was the line that मेरा risk taking capacity अभी तक पूरा utilize नहीं हुआ है. So that risk taking capacity that we see again and again is what is happening here. So there is not much information that will leak and reach. There is no much documentation of processes. There is no trust across the spectrum, where he's even trusting his ministers, I doubt, in taking certain kind of decisions. So yeah, let's not go into that area, I guess.